Lieutenant drew his weapon and shot him dead on the spot.
Damn. Damn.
Yes, we will die. We will kill. We will cut, slash, burn, and destroy. We fear no one.
Those some big words there. Those some big words there. Like, oh, okay. So I was supposed to do a second video for him because he's a level 2 member, but I fucking forgot.
Sultan Mustafa
So
III, who held the throne
you
at the
get
time,
a sec.
criticized his Grand Vizier
You
Ragip Pasha
get a
for
second
allegedly
thing,
avoiding war with
Mr.
Russia.
Mephi.
In response to the Sultan, the Pasha said, "My Sultan, I am not avoiding war." The Ottoman Empire resembles a roaring lion from afar. Its majesty alone frightens many European states. But if we go to war, our enemies will see that the roaring lion has no teeth in its mouth and no claws on its paws. Can a lion without teeth or claws have the power to tear anything apart? 150 years had passed since the words of Ragip Pasha. Though belated, the statesman had begun to realize the state of affairs, and efforts for recovery had started. Almost no concrete results would be achieved.
See, so
As the
weird
20th
seeing this in
century
color,
began,
bruh.
The Ottoman Empire was exhausted in every aspect. Many provinces had been lost. The only remaining lands were the Balkans, Anatolia, and the Arabian Peninsula.
And that's
Especially the
part of
Balkans
it.
had always been, as throughout history, a boiling cauldron. In the 1880s, Germany's Iron Chancellor Bismarck had remarked, "One day, a great European war will break out over some damned foolish thing in the Balkans." He was not exaggerating. The Greeks, who had managed to separate early, the newly independent Serbs, and the Bulgarians, who had yet to break away, were all working with full force to stir the Balkan cauldron once again. After the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78, the state declared financial bankruptcy, and its condition was pitiful. When Sultan Abdulhamid
Shit. Financial bankruptcy is crazy.
II ascended the throne in 1876, he faced immense difficulties. For decades, the British had been seen as the guarantors of the territorial integrity of the Ottoman state, but in the Russo-Turkish War, they had abandoned the Ottomans to face Russia alone. With the war came the unraveling of the Balkans, threatening the Ottoman presence in the region. The Treaty of Berlin had redrawn the borders of Ottoman Europe into a narrow corridor stretching from the Adriatic to the Aegean. They were extremely difficult to defend militarily against both external and internal enemies. The Balkan states surrounding the Ottoman territories harbored irredentist ambitions, seeking to claim either all or part of the lands left to the Ottomans by invoking the rights of minorities from their own ethnic or religious groups. After the war, the Sultan would begin restructuring the Ottoman army according to his own vision and ideas. Yet during the reign of Sultan Abdulaziz, expensive and fiscally irresponsible armament projects and wartime spending had led to extraordinary levels of both domestic and foreign debt. The Ottoman economy was in dire condition. Due to the mounting debt, even the salaries of civil servants and soldiers could no longer be paid.
Whoa!
As a result of the pressure and threats exerted by creditor countries, chiefly France, to recover their loans and accumulated interest, it was decided on December 20th, 1881, to establish the Ottoman Public Debt Administration. This
Shit, capitalism strikes again. Capitalism strikes again. I swear that's what these European powers always like, that's usually like their goal, their aim, their incentive, to put your ass in debt, man. Once your ass gets in debt, oh my gosh, you're basically a slave. That's basically what I interpreted from this. The Ottoman Empire basically just is on shackles now because of its fucking debt, man. Ugh.
administration, operating independently of the Ottoman treasury, would collect taxes from designated revenue sources and make principal and interest payments to creditors. Critical and highly profitable sources such as tobacco, alcohol, and salt were handed over to this administration. Under these conditions, implementing any meaningful army reform had become extremely difficult. Faced with these constraints,
and this is your beloved Western Europe, right? This is your beloved. Well, I don't know. A lot of people watching this are Turkish. Like literally, 25 to 30% of my viewers are fucking Turkish. So I don't know that this doesn't apply to y'all, but yeah, this is how the West. The mighty West got rich, okay, and this is how the West still gets rich, okay, maintains its prosperity, okay, because there's a lot of people overseas that don't understand what actually keeps these Western fucking countries afloat. However, if you look at Britain's a prime example of this, right? Britain Britain completely lost its empire. Okay, and look at what happened to Britain now. Okay, now that Britain has fucking lost its empire, Britain is just on a downward spiral. Why? Because the thing, look, even though I'm proud of my heritage and blah 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 blah, look, Britain has done a lot of shit. I'm aware of that. Okay, but once Britain lost its main source of revenue, which was its empire, which was by no means a sunshine and rainbows, okay, fucking everyone's getting along. No, Britain was ripping off people left, right, and center. That is a fact. So once Britain lost all of that shit, well, look at what happened to Britain now, right? We have Britain that had to do this shit. The same thing that happened to the Ottoman Empire. Britain was bankrupt after World War II, so America forced it to decolonize, right? You know, it didn't take until 2017, I think, or 2015, like very recently, until Britain finished paying off its debts of World War II to America. Okay, and Britain left the EU. Even then, all these other Western European countries within that union, France, right? Good example there. France, 20% of its fucking GDP is like just from exploiting West Africa. Good 20% of its fucking GDP, bro. That's insane. That's insane, bro. Like people overseas have this stupid idea that, oh my god, the West is so rich. I need to reach the West, bro. I need to reach the West. But they don't ask themselves why. Shit like this, bro. Shit like this. We see countries trying to do this too, aside from the West, like China. We see China, its debt trap policy, right? So it's not just the West that does this, but I'm just pointing that out because I'm so sick of this misconception that, oh my gosh, the West is rich. It must be so sunshine and rainbows, and the West is just superior because of it. That's not the case. That's not the case.
Abdul Hamid prioritized creating a loyal, apolitical army that would be completely obedient to his reign and focused on dealing with internal enemies. The army's theoretical primary duty defending the country from external threats thus became secondary in the order of priorities.
Why'd I say I'd man the grill?
Order of priorities. Abdul Hamid planned to rely on the European balance of power and limited concessions to avoid potential wars. What mattered most to him was the army's loyalty and its ability to deal with domestic dissent.
Facts.
Like his uncle Abdulaziz, Sultan Abdul Hamid was deeply interested in technical military innovations and educational institutions. However, the massive burden of debt and the loss of control over many revenue sources pushed the Sultan to make difficult choices about priorities. The navy built under Abdulaziz would be sacrificed. All available resources were allocated to the army, which had been tasked with the daunting challenge of defending the Balkans. Over time, some naval vessels would even be sold as scrap just to pay the salaries of civil servants. Abdul Hamid's keen interest in military education reforms was, in large part, due to financial constraints. Military education was less expensive than importing foreign weaponry and promised greater returns. Seeking to increase his legitimacy in the eyes of the public, the Sultan launched a significant wave of reform focused on military schooling. The number of military schools established under Abdulaziz was to be increased. Cities like Baghdad, Beirut, Damascus, Edirne, Bursa, Manastir, Erzurum, Trabzon, Aleppo, Mosul, Thessaloniki, and Skopje were among the places where schools were opened. The fact that these schools were established primarily in areas with large Muslim and Turkish populations was no coincidence. The crushing defeat by
Honestly, if I was the late Ottoman Empire, and you could say that I'm using hindsight, I probably would have just fucking abandoned the Balkans entirely. I just consolidate my power within Anatolia and the Arabian Peninsula. The Balkans honestly just caused way too much issues for the Ottomans.
the Russians, coupled with increasing political opposition, particularly from Christian groups, was beginning to reshape the character of the state. Around the cult of the Sultan, a new concept of patriotism was being constructed, one rooted in loyalty to the ruler and identification with the dynasty. The Ottomans took inspiration from the Austro-Hungarian Empire's approach to patriotism, which had been built around loyalty to the Habsburg dynasty within a multi-ethnic, multi-religious. Abdul Hamid's interest in the technological and educational dimensions of military reform, combined with his autocratic style of rule, his distrust towards senior military officials, led him to choose Germany as a military model and to request assistance from Germany in carrying out reforms. The German military mission that arrived in the capital in April 1882 would open the door to a new era for the Ottoman Empire. In earlier years, the army had been modeled after France. However, France's attempts to use its influence in the Ottoman Empire for political purposes gradually weakened ties between the two states. In particular, the French occupation of Tunisia in 1881 revealed that French influence posed a serious threat, and that France had no intention of respecting the territorial integrity of the empire. From that point on, German influence within the Ottoman Empire would grow steadily. To improve military education, a German officer, Colmar von der Goltz, arrived in 1883 and would become the symbolic figure of Germany's growing influence in the Ottoman military. The military reform that had begun would bear its first fruits in the 1897 Greco-Turkish War. For the first time in its history, the Ottoman High Command was able to prepare for war with previously drawn-up deployment and mobilization plans. As early as 1886, von der Goltz had drafted plans targeting Greece. The Ottoman army succeeded in defeating the Greek forces. Above all, the Ottoman General Staff was able, for the first time, to function not merely as a bureaucratic office, but as an actual upper military headquarters. The management of the war was facilitated by
Go check out my reaction to this war, by the way.
the newly constructed railway and telegraph lines, and logistical operations were largely successful. This relatively easy victory and the seemingly effective reform efforts within the army prevented deeper structural problems from being recognized. Sultan Abdul Hamid, gripped by a paranoia over a potential military coup, viewed the assembly of large army units, even for maneuvers, as a threat to himself and his rule. As a result of this restriction, Ottoman pashas were never able to gain the experience of commanding their troops under real combat conditions.
Ay, ay, ay.
Likewise, due to their unfamiliarity with the speed and complexity of modern warfare, most pashas had little practical value in battle and often became more of a burden than an asset to their troops. Ottoman units lacked the capacity to operate above the battalion level or to carry out complex maneuvers. In order to preserve the stability of his reign and of the army, the Sultan kept senior commanders in their posts for excessively long periods, which blocked promotions and created a bottleneck, effectively eliminating advancement opportunities for the younger generation. This growing frustration within the upper echelons of the army became particularly widespread among young staff officers trained in the German style. Disillusioned by the internal security crises and the experience of irregular warfare against Balkan insurgents, these young officers lost faith in both the army and the political system. The war only deepened their exhaustion and hopelessness, pushing them toward political alternatives. Through connections with their classmates and comrades in arms, they began to form clandestine organizations in opposition to the autocratic regime. The disadvantaged Balkan territories, shaped by the Treaty of Berlin, were under threat from the Balkan nations, while the eastern provinces faced new challenges from the Armenians, who had for the first time gained special privileges. In the face of these threats, neither the Sultan nor the statesmen were able to
I'm not even going to talk about that. I already talked enough about this in my previous Turkey reaction, so I'm not going to talk about that here.
devise an effective plan.
Go check out my other
The Sublime Porte
reactions in the
prioritized diplomacy in hopes of preventing intervention by the great powers, rather than directly confronting the nationalist movements that were tearing the empire apart. As a result, the task of suppressing separatist uprisings was left entirely to provincial army units. Yet the commanders of these units, who had often obtained their posts through loyalty to the Sultan rather than merit, generally showed no interest in the responsibilities assigned to them, leaving the actual fighting to units already engaged with the separatists. The responsibility for defining, leading, and managing the strategy to combat separatist threats that jeopardized the unity and survival of the empire, was placed entirely in the hands of young officers at the regimental and battalion levels. The main subject of conflict in the Balkans, referred to in Ottoman sources as Rumelia, and by Europeans as Macedonia, was the region's complex ethnic composition. Due to its diverse population, Macedonia resembled an ethnographic museum. Turks, Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, Vlachs, Albanians, and Jews all lived together
Who are Vlachs?
in the region.
Who are that?
Despite this diversity, Turks had for centuries been the largest population group. For the Turks, Macedonia was a second homeland. The Ottoman Empire administered it as if it were a province of Anatolia. According to a census ordered by Hussein Hilmi Pasha,
That is wow. That's fucking insane to think about. Would have never imagined that. Also, because many people told me that many Turks told me that the Ottomans never really tried to colonize. Even though I said that the Ottoman Empire was a colonial empire, which it was, many Turks told me, oh, the Ottomans never really like sent Turks into indigenous lands that weren't theirs, right? Like outside of Anatolia. Many people said that outside of Anatolia, those lands were largely just for the most part just inhabited by the original peoples that were there, right? But I don't know. That's kind of mad to me to think about, because freaking Macedonians are literally just like Bulgarians in denial. But like Macedonia, second home for damn, I don't know. That's just wild to me to think about. Unironically canon in our timeline.
In 1904, the region was home to 1.5 million Muslims, mostly Turks, 896,000 Bulgarians,
Wow.
307,000 Greeks, 100,000 Serbs, and 99,000 Vlachs. This demographic structure encouraged the three states to which these populations were ethnically tied, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece, to lay claim to the territory of Macedonia. These insurgent activities were first initiated by Bulgarians and later expanded with the involvement of Greeks and Serbs. As terrorism and uprisings
Notice how he's not talking about a Macedonia identity, just his Bulgarian. Just from the source that he took. Okay. Now I don't have any. I have Bulgarians here and there that watch my stuff, but I don't have any like Macedonians that watch my stuff. I don't really think anyone cares about the whole issue between Macedonia and fucking Bulgaria, but it's just mind blowing to me how easy it is to just distort history, and people will just believe it.
increased, Sultan Abdulhamid II issued an imperial decree in November 1902 regarding the Rumelian provinces. Under this decree, governors would be granted expanded powers, the judiciary would be made more independent, every village with at least 50 households would receive a school, and a general inspectorate would be established to oversee these efforts. Hüseyin Hilmi Pasha was appointed as the general inspector. It ultimately failed to dissuade the insurgent committees from continuing their acts of terror and aggression. At the center of the search for solutions to this crisis were young officers and intellectuals. The opposition, though composed of many different factions, was united around one idea: that the autocratic and arbitrary regime built by Sultan Abdulhamid was harming the nation's interests.
That's a cool
In the
demographic
last
map.
quarter of the 19th century, a question rising among Ottoman intellectuals abroad, what is to be done, began to take organizational form through political societies at the dawn of the new century. The common goal of these groups was the restoration of the constitutional monarchy that the Sultan had reluctantly declared in 1876. Some, such as the Ottoman Revolutionary Party, pushed for even more radical change. Ottomans know that it is a sacred duty to put down a rabid dog. Until now, the Ottoman Revolutionary Party has refrained from spilling blood, but it has now firmly resolved to punish the oppressors by force and avenge the victims. If the police or military try to block our path, only death will separate us from our cause. Yes, we will die, we will kill, we will cut, slash, burn, and destroy. We fear no one.
There's some big words there. Those some big words there. Like, yeah. You talk the talk, but can you walk the walk?
Even the dynamite that will extinguish the monster Sultan's star and scatter its ashes to the sky is ready. Wherever the public good points, we will strike. Chanting truth or death, we will storm the parliament into session and uproot this tyrannical government from its core. This we declare. As the number of such societies grew, they also radicalized. Leading them was the Committee of Union and Progress, originally founded as the Ottoman Union Society in 1889 among students of the military medical school. The movement developed through propaganda and mergers, eventually adopting the name Committee of Union and Progress by 1907. CUP ideology rapidly spread among the officers of the Third Army stationed in Rumelia.
Off topic though, but I love the mustaches that they have. I don't know, bro. Those Turks and their mustaches, bro. I love it. I love it, bro. I don't know. I just love it. I have a small mustache growing, but it never really like grew that much. It just really and truly never really grew that much.
To combat banditry and guerrilla groups. These officers were directly confronting Bulgarian, Greek, and Serbian activities in Macedonia.
Woo! Look at
and
that
its surroundings.
demographic map, bro.
A new event would soon galvanize the already oppositional CUP into decisive action. In June 1908, King Edward and Tsar Nicholas met in Reval. Their primary focus was the growing threat of Germany and Austria. Britain was alarmed by Germany's naval expansion, while Russia was concerned by its growing land forces. Austria's proposed Sanjak railway project, beginning in Novi Pazar, also stirred discontent in both Russia and Serbia.
We could have planned this a lot.
During the talks, the two monarchs also discussed Austria's activities in and around Macedonia. Edward and Nicholas reached full agreement on a plan to enforce reforms in Macedonia through the Ottoman Empire. However, both countries wished to avoid giving the impression that their meeting was an anti-German alliance. Thus, the post-meeting declarations emphasized only the Macedonian reforms. The spotlight on the Macedonia issue caused deep concern and panic among CUP members. The idea that European powers had decided to divide up the Ottoman Empire spread quickly.
Oh.
As a result, CQP concluded that the time had come to act and reform the Ottoman political system. Their response to the threat of imperial dissolution would be to restore constitutional governance. Sultan Abdul Hamid was closely monitoring COP activities in Macedonia through his agents. The committee, therefore, first sought to eliminate this surveillance network. They planned an assassination against Lieutenant Colonel Nazım Bey, the military commander of Thessaloniki and one of the Sultan's trusted men. Although Nazım Bey survived the attempt with injuries, the Sultan reacted harshly. He summoned and imprisoned 38 high-ranking officers from Thessaloniki and Manastir. This development alarmed the officers of the Third Army in Rumelia and pushed them to act. On July 3rd, 1908, in the town of Resna, Senior Captain Ahmed Niazi Bey took to the mountains with a group of volunteers and declared that he would not lay down arms until the Constitution was proclaimed. He justified his uprising with the following words: "All the people are drowning in a flood of emotions, waiting for the smallest spark, for a sincere act to ignite a general uprising. They awaited a model to emulate, a pioneering move." Niazi Bey's uprising marked the beginning of a major movement. Officers affiliated with the Committee of Union and Progress began opening weapons depots and distributing arms to the public. Sultan Abdul Hamid immediately dispatched one of his trusted men, Shemsi Pasha, to Monastir to suppress the unrest. Shemsi Pasha paused to send a telegram to the palace. In his message, he advised activating Albanian tribal leaders and inciting them to fight against the rebel officers defying the government. However, Shemsi Pasha was already being shadowed by a Karp assassin, Lieutenant Atif.
You know, I'm not saying a lot because usually I say a lot in my reactions, but I said this before in my Russia reaction that, you know, I'm just so invested in it, like extremely invested in it, that I'm just trying to take in all the important details because this is very, very interesting. Plus, you guys really do prefer it whenever I just let the video play and then I talk after a while. So
as the Pasha was about to board his train, Lieutenant drew his weapon and shot him dead on the spot.
Damn.
Remarkably, the Albanian soldiers escorting Shemsi Pasha were not going to do much to catch the assassin. This assassination would dramatically shift the course of events. Shortly after the incident, another prominent unionist, Enver Bey, also fled to the mountains. Even Tatar Osman Pasha, who had been sent to replace Shemsi Pasha, would be captured and taken to the mountains by Niazi Bey's forces. Written propaganda was also being used to pressure the Sultan. 2 days after Niazi Bey's defection, the Monastir branch of the Committee of Union and Progress began posting declarations across the streets. These manifestos proclaimed the current government as illegitimate and demanded the restoration of the rule of law, meaning the reinstatement of the constitution. Though the language used was respectful toward the Sultan, the messages expressed unwavering resolve regarding the declaration of constitutional rule. Despite this mounting pressure, Sultan Abdul Hamid did not immediately yield. He initially sought to resist and consulted with several of his pashas. But in response to this hesitation, the CUPU's Monastir branch unilaterally proclaimed the constitution on July 23rd. The Salonika headquarters joined this declaration in solidarity with Monastir. At that point, the Sultan realized that resistance was futile. Acknowledging the reality, he is reported to have said, "I am the one who first established the constitution. Since the nation now desires its restoration, I grant it once more." And so,
Shit, bro. Late Ottoman Empire, bro. Damn. Damn. No, this actually does like highlight a lot more to me, like why the late Ottoman Empire was just declining so much, dude. Golly. A lot of details here. That's why I was so invested in it, because I was like, wow. Like, damn, bro. So much details here that makes so much sense now. Because I always used to wonder to myself, like, why didn't the Ottomans try to bounce back? Why couldn't such a big empire like that bounce back? Oh my gosh. This makes a whole lot of sense to me now. Wow. Damn.
on July 24th, 1908, the reinstatement of the 1876 Constitution was officially announced. But the constitutional regime would only bring more chaos to the Ottoman Empire.
Wow. Wow. A lot of details here that helped me learn a lot. A lot more makes you understand why the Ottoman Empire would eventually just come to freaking fall apart, bro. Oh my gosh. Wow. This video is a part of Members Week. If you're an active viewer, check out my membership, 99 cents a month. If you are new to my channel, subscribe. If you like my reactions, if you have any suggestions like this, comment it in the comments below. Wonderful video here, man. Check out my other Ottoman, Turkey reactions, all that stuff on my channel, man. Look, like I said, if you're an active viewer, you have suggestions for me, you comment a lot, I recommend you join the membership. Only 99 cents a month. Comments are done much more quicker. Your suggestions are done much more quicker. I'm gonna put the rest of the perks that you get when you become a member in my channel, okay, in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.